Hello and welcome to today's video. Now, I want to start today's video by asking you a question. Do the prompts that you create for ChatGPT or whichever large language model that you use give you the best outputs every single time? If the answer is no, then this video is completely for you. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to bust some of the misconceptions that are out there about how ChatGPT works. And on a very basic level, we're going to explain exactly what ChatGPT is doing. Then what we're going to do is build upon that knowledge to be able to give you what you need to supercharge your prompts and get better outputs every single time. Now, I need one thing from you. That one thing is to forget everything that you currently know about ChatGPT and about large language models, because I can guarantee that you have some of the myths embedded in your brain which are stopping you from getting the most out of these models. So, if you can do that, then this video is really going to help you. I want you to do one quick thing before we get started. I want you to drop a comment down below about what you think that large language models are doing when you ask them a prompt, what they're doing to understand your prompt and what they're doing to reply to you. And at the end of the video, you can compare what you've learned with what you originally thought about and see how close you were to being right and how much you've learned during the video. If you drop that comment down below right now, and then what we'll do is get straight back to the video. So, how does ChatGPT work? How do large language models work? Well, there are two ways that people do misunderstand large language models, and that's what I'm going to start with. The first way is to attribute it with some kind of human like or superhuman understanding of the language that's being generated. And that can be really dangerous because if we start to attribute human understanding to it, we do attribute a deeper meaning to the words that it's given us. And this can be why some people start to think that it may have some kind of sentience or start to attribute it with the kind of thought processes that we go into when we output language. These models are not doing that. They do not have that kind of understanding. And it is a bad move to try and attribute it with that kind of understanding. Firstly, because it can be dangerous, but secondly, and more practically, it makes it harder to use the models. If we think that it is going to have a human understanding of the language we put into it, then the times where it gets things completely wrong in a way that humans wouldn't do come across as even more frustrating than if we accept that it is a computer, it's not a human, it doesn't understand in a human way the way that it's meant and the way that language is put together. And that makes it a lot easier for us to understand the frustrations and work for ways to overcome them and to get around them. So if you are starting to attribute it and find yourself even subconsciously attributing it with human understanding, take a step back and remember that that isn't the way that these models work, because you're already setting yourself up for a whole load of frustration and disappointment if you attribute it with some kind of human understanding. So the second mistake that people make is to think of ChatGPT as some sort of souped up version of autocomplete. And I understand where that comes from because it is much, much closer to the truth. It is correct that given a sequence, ChatGPT will be trying to predict what comes next in that sequence, but not in the same way that autocomplete does. What autocomplete is trying to do simply is to work out what words you would probably say next in a sequence. And that is as far as it goes. It doesn't try and generate anything new or generate anything different based on the concepts that it has. It is just trying to act like you would normally act if you were sending a text. When ChatGPT is doing it, it's very different, and it is important to understand the differences, not because the concept is different, not because calling it a super autocorrect is completely wrong, but because it really limits the way that you can use it. Because if all it's doing is trying to guess what comes next, there's only a certain number of purposes you can use that for. And by the same token as why we're looking at it as human like will make you more frustrated, looking at it as just autocomplete will limit how you can use it and limit the benefits you can get by using ChatGPT to generate new content. So what we're going to do is we've looked at the two ways that you can make mistakes at looking at it. One way that is giving it far too much credit and one way that's giving it far too little credit. And then what we can do is look at how we can find the middle way, the best way forward to be able to use it by understanding what ChatGPT is doing. So how does ChatGPT work? Well, let's start by understanding what it actually sees. And that's really important because many people think that what ChatGPT sees is small parts of words, and it's just guessing the next part of each word. And that is kind of accurate in some ways, but it's also way off track. So when you send something to ChatGPT, the first thing it does is break up all of these words and then converts them into tokens. Now, tokens aren't smaller parts of the words. What they are is a mathematical representation of those words that stands in for those parts of the words and is in a format that the neural network can understand. So these are all mathematical representations of each part of the word that you've sent. What that means is that it isn't looking at the words, it isn't looking at the meaning of each word. What is it looking at is how each token corresponds to another token. And that's mathematically how close that connection is. If it's really close, then it's more likely going to choose that word. If it's quite distant, then it all depends on the settings that it has in how the decision will be made as to which word it will choose. So when we're looking at these tokens here aren't words, they don't have meaning. All they have are connections. So when we're taking a look, for example, at the word train, that will have a lot of different connections depending on the context. It could have the connection to station. It could have the connection to steam engine. It could have the connection to Eurotunnel. It could have the connection to gym. It could have the connection to weights. It could have the connection to football. It could have the connection to tennis. It could have the connection to sports, running, all of these different things. But this all depends on the context that surrounds it. So each token that's sent to it will go into that mathematical representation and it will put the context in place for the decisions it's going to make for the next token that comes. So that's going to all be done mathematically. It's not done with any kind of meaning. It's all mathematical on a vector. So when it's choosing the connections, it's making the best decision based on the information it has. So depending on all those 8,000 tokens you've put into ChatGPT for example, and all those different parts of context that are there, it is going to use all of that to put into an equation to decide which token comes next. So it doesn't understand any of these things. If you were to tell someone, for example, I'm going to take the train to go training. Now, very clearly, if you are in any way sporty, everyone you speak to will know that you're going to take a train to go to the gym, to go play sports, to go and do something like that. If you have really bad grammar, for example, and someone knows you've never been to the gym ever, then they could just think that what you mean is, I'm going to take the train to go and do some train spotting and sort of not jot down some trains. You just don't have very good grammar. You don't really know which word to use. You chose the wrong word. And people will know that based on the context of you as a person and on what a train is and what training is. GPT-4 and ChatGPT don't have either of those things. They don't understand what a train is. They don't understand what you are. They don't understand what you do. They don't even understand that it's a word. All they know is that train and training have connections to different things. And the connections will make sense depending on the context of everything else around it. So for that reason, when you are writing anything for ChatGPT or for GPT-4 or for any large language model out there, you have to bear in mind that there is no understanding at all of the world or the words or anything like that that you are given to it. All it knows is that there are connections, some are strong, some are weak, and it's going to choose the most appropriate one. And it's going to do that with a high degree of randomness. So when you send anything over to it, you all know that it uses neural networks, and that's how the decisions are made. The neural networks have a lot of different training, a lot of different weights and biases, and it will choose the most appropriate words depending on the context that it's got. But there's a massive amount of randomness in there. And the creativity slide that you have there is what allows you to set how much randomness there is. When you up that creativity slider, what that does is it allows the decision to be made between a lot of weaker connections. So words, for example, with train, you would have the words that are clear, the clear words like track, station, steam train, electric train, stuff like that. If you were to open that net up a little bit, it would allow you to possibly have the connection of train spotting or something along those lines. And then that connection could then be made to the film Train Spotting or something along those lines. So when you increase and decrease the creativity slider, what that's doing for the large language model is it's allowing it to choose from a wider range of connections. And inside that neural network is a massive amount of randomness because it's the only way, by adding the randomness in there, it's the only way to allow it to give slightly different outputs every single time. If it was to have no randomness, then what's it going to do? It's going to give you the exact same output every single time. It's going to choose the exact same word every single time. It will choose the one that's got the best connection, depending on all the settings that are in there and all the context that's there. When you add some randomness to it, it allows it to give you slightly different words every single time. And that gives you the chance to get a different output every single time that sticks to it roundabout the same meaning, just giving you different words, the ones that are perhaps less appropriate but mean the same thing. And that all comes from a bit of randomness. So you can never guarantee that you're going to get the same output every single time. What you can be sure of is that the neural network will choose the most appropriate connections, and it will give you ones that are pretty much similar most of the time, as long as you give the right input. And that's why it's important to understand these things when you're writing for a neural network. Because if you realize that it isn't looking at the words, it's looking at the connections, it's looking at how closely related different tokens are. And that allows you to decide, okay, how can I write in a way that someone who doesn't understand what the words mean, but understands how each word is connected, how can I write in a way that that will understand? So I'm going to go through the three things that we can do to get the best possible result from our prompt engineering. And the first one isn't a technique, but it's really important that we take this approach with every piece of prompt engineering we do. And that's to have acceptance. When we send over anything to any large language model, we've got to accept that sometimes it will get things wildly wrong. The fact is, if you have a prompt that 9 times out of 10 gets things spot on, and 1 times out of 10 it gets things so wrong that you don't even know what it's done, that's nothing to do with you. That's nothing to do with your prompt. What that is, it's just gone in a random direction. If a prompt that 1 times out of 10 gets it spot on and 9 times out of 10 goes off in random directions that you don't understand, the chances are we'd start tweaking that prompt and we need to get it right, because we've probably got a prompt that has loose connections to the output that we want. And because that loose connection, on some occasions, randomly switching to that right answer, but the other times it's taking the stronger connections. And that's where we need to take a look at the prompts we're creating, and we need to understand how we tweak them. And we tweak them by using the information we've learned today. Please bear this in mind when you put your prompts over. When you start getting your output on ChatGPT, look at what direction it's going in. If it's going in a completely wrong direction, that token is going to influence the next one. And when it starts going in that wrong direction, it's going to continue going further in that direction. And if it is going that direction, 10 words, 20 words, 30 words into a output, then you might want to stop and you might want to resubmit it. And the second thing we need to do is we need to start writing in a way that allows us to clearly have the links between the text and the output that we need. So when we're writing for ChatGPT, we often will write in a way that we kind of unconsciously think that the AI will understand, because humans understand it. So if we write, please rewrite the below text, for example, then press enter a couple of times and copy the text over, we think that the AI model is going to answer it with the rewritten text. But bear in mind that the AI model doesn't know what the word below means. It doesn't know what any of the words mean. It doesn't know that any text is below what you have written already. We knew that the playground didn't actually know that it was meant to respond to us. It was just going to pick up from where we left off. So if we would write a question out and then press enter, it would usually give us an answer, but sometimes it would do something completely different. It wouldn't know it's meant to answer. If we wrote question, colon, and then put the question, answer, colon, and the answer, then it knew to respond to us with an answer. If we were to write a piece that said, please rewrite the below text, and then have original text, colon, and the text copied there, and then underneath have rewritten text, colon, and then send it off to the AI, we knew that it would give us the rewritten text. It would work every single time. It's got a lot better. It does usually get things right, but when we're writing in a way that isn't clearly having a link between words, the words below doesn't seem to link to anything really. What we need to do is write in a way that maybe mimics that, and have, please, can you rewrite this text? And then have text, colon, have the text, send it off. It's more likely to give you an output that is consistent with the input that it had. We used to be able to get it into a bit of a pattern that way, but you can't really do as much with ChatGPT because the system prompt kind of takes that to another level. And we haven't covered the system prompt. We don't really need to here. We will do that in a future episode. But from this point here, what we need to think about is having those logical connections. So have the question at the end rather than the beginning. Don't put, please rewrite this text at the beginning, put that at the end. It then knows that that's what it's meant to respond to. The clear connection to, please rewrite this text, is to rewrite the text above it. But once again, we could have issues with that. Sometimes you might find that it just rewrites that line because this text connections could be just the text that's there, not the text that's above it. So we need to remember that to write in a way that has clear connections between what we put into it and what we get out of it. And the third thing we need to do, and this is the most important thing, is to be creative with our inputs. That's where the greatest work with these large language models has come from. So when people have started using ChatGPT and started asking it to act as A or you are now A, instead of having it just writing the question to it, that creativity allowed us to get a different kind of input and a different kind of output from it that we never used to get before. So we need to start using those kinds of creativity to be able to improve the kind of outputs that we're getting. So start tweaking things in a way that you maybe don't know what it's going to do. You don't know if it's going to work or you don't know if it's not going to work. Maybe give it a list of different commands and then a question at the end. So you are now this, you are this, you are this, you do this, you don't do this, you do this. And then ask a question at the end to write in some style and see what it does. That kind of creativity, by taking into account the logical connections between these words, that will allow you to get better outputs than you've ever been able to get before. Because there is such an element of randomness into it that you don't always know what thing's going to work. Try and do something nobody's done before to get better output from the large language models. So that's it. We need to approach it with acceptance that's going to get things wrong, to be logical with the connections between the words in a way that's clear, and to be creative and understand the random nature of it. Certain things that we don't expect to do something could have a massive impact on the outputs that we get. So let's start putting this into action, and let's start using the information we've learned today to be able to get better outputs every single time. So that's it. That's the video. Now, did you get it right at first? Were you right with your description of what ChatGPT is doing? If so, drop a comment down below to say that you were, or if not, drop a comment down below saying what you've learned today and how you've developed your knowledge of ChatGPT in this video. And if you like what I go through, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and press the notification bell so you can see when I post more videos. And finally, if you've liked this video, please like it. It helps with the algorithm, and it helps if you share it with other people as well that maybe could benefit from watching this video. So that's it for me today. I'll see you again next time.